Thank you everyone for joining this afternoon for this scenario modeling webinar. Kind of a fun one today. We're joined by Chris Urbanus, Director of Energy Services at Burgess. And we'll just be talking to Chris a little bit about how their team uses scenario modeling, some of the use cases they have for it, as well as how they bring more value to their clients as a result. And on top of that, David will share a few new exciting features that we've recently launched or are in the process of adding to scenario modeling. So yeah, with that being said, I'll let David take it away.
All right, yeah, so thanks, Sarah. So as Sarah said, today I'm gonna talk a little bit. I'm also gonna ask Chris Urbanus a couple questions about, we may have lost him, about a few different things about how he uses scenario modeling. And before we do that, I'm going to do a little bit of a demo of the new scenario modeling features that we've released in the either yesterday or the past month or so. And then with that, we'll get into a question and answer with Chris. So quickly, Chris, he's the Director of Energy Services at Burgess Construction Consultants. He's a rater in QAD. Burgess completes, a few thousand ratings, more than a few thousand ratings in the Texas and Colorado markets. And so far, they've completed 1,970 scenario modeling combinations and 24 different scenario modeling projects since August of this year. So he's gotten a lot of experience using the tool and can help, share his experience with it and how it's working for him and kind of how he uses the tool. A little bit about Burgess. They complete energy inspections in multifamily and single family, as well as a full suite of energy engineering services and construction QA services. So I'm going to do a little bit of a demo here, and then we'll return and we'll have a conversation with Chris. Let me pop over here to Ecotrope. I'm going to show you a few different things in scenario modeling. To start out with scenario modeling, you need to select a few energy models. And once you've selected the energy models, you can start scenario modeling. The first thing to do is define the types of design changes you'd like to test in your what if scenario. And you'll notice there's a new what if scenario down here at the bottom, which is mechanical ventilation. So this now allows you to say, what if they used a different kind of mechanical ventilation in the home that we've selected for scenario modeling. So I'm going to go in here and say, what if they did an ERV with energy recovery percent? I'm actually not super familiar with what those ranges are. We're going to say that it operates 24 hours a day. And then an interesting thing here, all of these homes could be different sizes. They can have all different infiltration values. So how much volume of ventilation will change based on each house. And you can select the different rates here by saying, I want the ventilation rate to meet one of these common standards, say ASHRAE 622 2013. And that is our mechanical ventilation design change. I'm going to add another design change here. And you'll see we have other things here supported for infiltration, building envelope components, and HVAC configuration. So with an HVAC configuration, you have to define the whole thing, both the mechanical systems and the distribution systems. And here in the next couple weeks, we'll release an addition here where you can just define the mechanical system or just define the distribution system as an individual design change, so you can isolate the impacts of both of those at the same time. In the next few weeks as well, we'll be adding logic here. So for example, for walls, if we say, let's model everything to an R20, you can say only model these, only make the change to walls that are above grade between conditioned space and exterior. Whereas right now, this is making a change to all of the walls in each energy model. So I'll move on here to the next step. Once you have picked your design changes, you select the scenarios. And so this is putting the design changes in an individual scenario. This one has both of them, and then maybe you want to do them individually. And finally, you have to say, how do I want to analyze these? Do I want to see the impact of these scenarios on the HERS index? So HERS results, or DOE Zero Energy, or Energy Star. So this will show you what the impact is on those scenarios on these energy models. And in the next few weeks, we're also adding a few state-specific codes, as well as kWh and utility costs to here as well. So you can see exactly how peak usage, annual usage, and utility costs change with each one of these scenarios. Finally, you review and submit, and this will send you the results of this scenario to your inbox in a spreadsheet that you can then analyze the data and share with your client or share with your internal staff, however you want to do that. Also kind of whatever your needs are. So that's scenario modeling. We've added mechanical ventilation now. You can do HVAC design changes, and very soon you'll be able to do individual mechanical systems and individual distribution system changes as well. So with that, we're going to transition here. I'm going to ask Chris a few questions. Chris is actually on the phone here in Arizona right now. And if you guys have any questions you'd want to ask either one of us specifically, please put that in the chat, and Sarah will be curating those and asking those at the end. And with that, I'm going to get started. And Chris, if you could start off by just sharing a little bit about what you do, what Burgess does, and kind of what services your team provides in the general kind of HERS rating world.
Sure, and thanks for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, so my role at the company is I handle all of the quality assurance, the oversight of all of our ResNet quality assurance processes and procedures. And then I also, on a day-to-day basis, manage a team at our corporate office that handles a lot of the administrative effort that goes along with implementing a HERS rating or Energy Star above code program scope of work for a builder. So that's everything from doing plan takeoffs, entering those takeoffs into the rating software, doing these design changes, value engineering, helping builders kind of work to the next codes, work through those advanced above code options, and then finally doing the QA on the work that's happening in the field and turning all of that work into a registered certified rating, whether that's a HERS rating or Energy Star or something like that. So I oversee all of that for all the divisions that we operate in. So I've got quite a wide view of code changes and how this process kind of works in a lot of different places.
Great. Yeah, so that's what I think we kind of want to focus on here. Is kind of why you decided to use scenario modeling, what you use it for. You just mentioned code changes, what the impact of it is from what you used to do to what you do today, and then finally, kind of any tips or tricks that you guys have learned for using it in the past 6 months or so. So let's start with it now, or with what kind of services you provide with scenario modeling. What questions are you trying to answer for your builders? What service are you trying to give to them with scenario modeling?
Yeah, so for any of the HERS raters that are on the webinar, you're probably a lot like our company, where being able to answer questions about how the codes are going to impact the builder, or making decisions about moving to something like Energy Star or another program, that is an inherent service that we feel like we need to be able to offer to a builder, not necessarily as a fee service, but it's part of our responsibility as a HERS rater. So what we're doing is, the primary use case is for code changes. It's for helping builders understand, number one, like, what are my options for getting to these advancing codes, 2021 IECC, and then also, hey, we're considering going to Energy Star. What do we need to do? And for me, I just explained I have a team at a corporate office that does that stuff, but we're not a humongous team. So that scenario modeling tool allows us to do a lot of that work in a lot shorter time frame, and be really agile with the responses back to a builder, because they tend to ask those questions when they're right up against one of those changes or one of those decisions. So you don't always get a lot of free time and a lot of long runway to answer those questions. So it really helps me with a pretty lean team to handle all the questions and all those different scenarios that we may need to look at.
Yeah. So in the past couple months, what have been the codes or programs that you've been analyzing the most?
So the two things that are going to be the high runners are going to be the 2021 IECC, and that's in Texas, that's in Colorado. So those are the two primary states where we've been looking at that advanced code, and then Energy Star. Energy Star, as in Texas, builders can meet the IECC by being Energy Star. So there's kind of a two birds, one stone approach as some builders want to take there. And then, as we're all aware, the 45L tax credit is now tied to that compliance path. So there's a lot of interest from builders who've never done Energy Star, who are wanting to know what it might take. How can they start to plan and have an idea of, are we in striking distance of how to get there, and what do we need to start thinking about in order to plan to achieve that above code program.
Yeah, could you kind of walk me through from like the start from the start of the analysis to having that conversation with the builder once you're done with the analysis, what you kind of do,
Sure.
say for the 45L, like kind of how do you start, how do you finish, what do you actually give to the builder?
Sure. The way that we have always approached it, and the way, because for a long time it was really just me and a couple of other people who go through this work. And so what our approach has been is we'll take a few models. We'll go find within our database the most prevalent built models, and then like the largest and the smallest model, for example, or base plan. And I'll try and build out a few of the scenarios that I think I'm going to want to run. I want to find some things that I know for sure will work within that smaller sample size. And so then I'll build out that sort of starting points for other team members to then take and use to apply that to larger sets. So when we have a large volume of these requests, that's what I'll do is I'll start with, let me figure out how to get the worst one to meet this threshold, and then start building other scenarios from there, rather than just plugging in things maybe randomly into the tool to see what works. I'm going to try to build something outside of that, and then plug those scenarios into the tool. So that all happens. We can do that pretty quickly depending upon the number of plans and the number of different scenarios we come up with. And so we do all that work on the back end. In the meantime, depending upon how much contact we have with that particular builder, I'll be talking to them to try and find out what maybe some non-negotiable things would be, because we don't want to spend a ton of time running scenarios with feature changes that are just never going to be possible, whether that's because of the construction type or the availability of a spec or, insulation, windows, mechanicals. If there's something in there where they go, Chris, we just absolutely can't make that work. Well, I want to know that so we don't include it. So I'm doing some of that in the meantime. And then once we compile all that information, we use part of the data that comes from the report within Ecotrope, and then we put together just a summary package, and we will email that to the builder with a summary, and then some PDFs of here's the packages that we were able to use to get to compliance. We'll summarize all that information, and then because that information is not always just easily digestible, we'll try and schedule a phone call to walk through that. Give them some time to review what we've said would work, and then try and schedule a phone call just to, if there's other questions, to kind of walk through. Because usually what happens is you'll do all of that, and then there'll still be more things that they say, well, can you try this? And there's times where builders say, hey, well, can you try this instead of this? and it's a viable thing to go and try. So that is a really important part of the process, is having that, the follow up to, hey, we just dumped kind of a lot of information on you about decisions that are pretty important. Let's talk in person or talk on the phone and make sure that we've hashed this out as well as we can, so that you're making a decision with the best information. And from there, it's just a matter of, if we've given them several options, which is always our goal, is to give a builder, at least 2 options about how to make this work. We don't ever want to just go in there with, there's only one way to do it. So then from there, it's just them deciding on which of these ways they're going to move forward with construction. And then we would start to implement inspection protocols to make sure all those things are happening in the field.
Yeah.
And that's really how it works, and how it has worked, at least.
Yeah. So it sounds like you grab a couple energy models that are the worst performers, and you figure out a couple of different ways to get that to pass. And then you move into scenario modeling to verify that those things you identified in that worst case model also get all of that builder's portfolio to pass whatever program you're trying to pass. And with that information, you're then able to go to the builder with the options of, hey, what do you want to do in this situation? And in that sense, it's kind of comprehensive.
Yes.
And is that so? How does that change how the builder perceives the analysis that you did? Do they react differently once you're able to bring this comprehensive result?
I think they do, because the way that we would usually use a situation like this is, we would do that initial analysis on the 4 or 5 or 10 plans, and we would give them the information on how those worked. Well, the hardest part for a rater beyond, after that, is manually going in and making all those changes to all the models and confirm that it does work on all the plans. And so being able to get through all of the back and forth with, here, these are the ways to do it, and then they say, oh, and then us being able to go back with the answer that says this works for all of them, or 80% or 50%, or whatever the math works out to, they're just able to make a decision, I think, a little more quickly, as opposed to, okay, now as a reader, we have to go back and do a few more weeks of legwork to update all the models, and then, okay, well, one doesn't meet, so now what does that mean? So you're able to kind of get to the end game, where an important part of this is, us as raters, we need to understand, is it 100%, or is there some number in between there that you'll be willing to manage using different ways of getting to your solution? Or if there's only half of them work with this, are you going to move forward with those half? Or how are we going to handle that? So it allows us to flesh that out a lot more quickly within the process, without it being something that lingers at the very end, where you've done a couple of months of work and then they go, never mind, we're not going to do any of it because one doesn't work. So it really it allows us to get some of the, not objections, but it's, you have to know what the builder expects from that result. If it has to be every plan and there's no negotiating that, then us knowing that means we put in that work earlier, and we don't let that be something that causes our work to be in vain at the end. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. And I've used the tool enough as well to know that you come up with a scenario that you're like, okay, I think this is the one, and then run it on a bunch more projects, and not all of them will pass the target like you thought they would based on that worst case. And that's because there's so much variability in these energy models. But I've never actually done that in the real world. I've not actually ever done that for a specific builder's portfolio. So kind of in your work with that, is there about how, like, once you get a scenario that you think passes the worst case, do you see 50% of the models that you go and apply it to pass, 80%? Do you kind of have like a a gut feeling on what that pass rate will be once you've developed the what you think is the best pathway?
I do. It's probably, I would say, in the work that we've done, I haven't really kept close track of it, but in just
Yeah.
thinking about how the results kind of pan out, usually it's about 70% of the time, all the models that go through it are passing. One of the things I've even used this for as kind of a separate tool is, if I'm expecting that the solution I'm putting in should get most of these models to pass, and there's some sort of weird outlier where the HERS index just doesn't quite make sense compared to the other ones, or the compliance results don't make sense, that also allows me to go back in, and I'll go use that kind of as a quality management tool to go back and look at the model that we have and make sure everything's in there the right way. Make sure we don't have, make sure we have the model built for that builder's specifications, so that, so it really allows you to kind of go back and make sure that you've cleaned up everything within the model. Because if you'll know from doing enough HERS ratings and doing enough modeling, like, this thing should have changed the result this much, and this is where it kind of should have ended up. So you can go back in there and clean up any of that stuff. But yeah, I would say it's probably between 70 and 75% of the time, the thing that works for the very worst plan in that portfolio is going to result in a pretty high level of compliance across the whole board.
Yeah. And it also kind of points out to this idea that your worst case model may be worst case because it has particular things that make it bad that the other homes just don't have. That, right?
A lot of windows.
A lot of windows. And so
a lot of windows.
Yeah. And so then if you make a design change that just tackles the windows, it has a really big impact on that worst case, but a smaller impact on all the others. So this helps you kind of hone in on that. And because you can do it comprehensively, you can identify that other 25% that you need to have a little bit different of a strategy to cover to get that 100%.
Yeah, and you bring up another good point. I'll kind of add on to that. You'll want to make sure that, especially with as much, I know in the markets that we're in, there's a lot of townhome product, a lot of attached product. And so, I was doing one for a builder a couple of months ago, and, looking through our top 10, there was a mix of their single family product and their townhome product. And those two things are going to have pretty significant differences in what you're talking about, and what will be the impacts of changing the envelope on an attached product versus changing the envelope on a single family detached product. So you don't want to necessarily run those two types of models through the same scenario, because you're not really talking about the same type of, you have less wall area, likely more window area, orientations are a little bit different. You'll have an entire wall that is connected to another home. So just parsing those out and running those separately without mixing them in there, that'll give you better results as well.
Yeah. This kind of brings us to the thing that we were discussing earlier this week about the local knowledge that you have. And we were talking about that because a lot of corporate, publicly traded builders, they are having particular ESG targets or particular goals for the corporate office. And that's all great. That's going to help the entire industry grow, because they're going to be following up on that and making sure that it gets done. But they don't necessarily know what the implication of that is on the boots on the ground, on the GC guy or woman in the community that they're being built. And that's where you kind of come in with your knowledge of exactly what the do's and the non-negotiables are for a particular builder, that you can use scenario modeling to say, oh, your corporate office says you have to hit HERS 50 or Energy Star or something, and you're a long ways away. And I know what you like to do and what you don't like to do. I can use this tool to help you kind of figure out how to please your boss so they can please their corporate office. And we see that as like a way that this tool can help empower you to help everybody grow the market as well.
Of course, and that really is kind of where this all is leading, is that there are a lot of initiatives that exist within this corporate structure, and a lot of that goes a lot of that is very important stuff, and they're novel goals. But if I run a scenario for a builder who builds homes in a particular type of way, let's say they at this point don't put all their ducts in conditioned space, and I come up with this scenario that works for all of that, and I go, yeah, here's the way to do it. And they go, well, here down in Corpus Christi, for example, that costs us 4 times the amount that blown-in insulation does. So like, why would you even tell me to do it? You know, if it's the only way, then it's the only way. But being able to know from division to division for us, you know, we capture enough data from doing the HERS ratings that we do. We know the existing things that go into those homes. So it makes it easier to get to the heart of the issue without, like I mentioned earlier, doing a bunch of legwork and coming up with these really grand scenarios that may solve the problem, but they're never going to be implemented. You know, the way I see the tool for us is I don't want to just do it to talk about sort of fairy tales or be a Debbie Downer about how hard it's going to be for you to do it. We see the tool as, we want to come up with solutions that you'll actually implement at some point. So it's not just wizardry. It really is trying to find solutions that we can ultimately then help the builders roll out and put into production. And so we have to have that local knowledge, and we have to have people that work in those different markets be able to feed back information to us, and say, yeah, hey, yeah, Chris, they don't ever do this, and I hear, you know, this is the reason why. And so we'll go, okay, we're not gonna talk about that then. But yeah, I think that's really important, because there can sometimes be a disconnect between those, the grand goals that exist, and really like how feasible is it to get done. And that's the other part of it, is the information we give them sometimes allows them to say, it's the juice just really isn't worth the squeeze in that case. So thanks for letting us know. We're going to have to decide to not go that route. But we want to give them the best information possible to make the decision for where they're going to build, not necessarily for what someone sitting at a different office who doesn't really know what's going on wants them to do. We try to merge those together.
Yeah. So we've talked kind of about kind of what the workflow is, kind of how you use the tool, what the benefit is. But I know we've talked, both of us, about things that you'd like it to be able to do that it doesn't do quite yet. If you can like list off what those are and kind of how you work around those, and kind of why you decided that you wanted to still use scenario modeling now, before those things that you would like to have aren't there yet.
Well, you mentioned a couple of them at the top of this that I'm excited about. So the main thing that was kind of not a hindrance, but something that we would love to be able to change, especially for clients in Texas. It was the ability to model different versions of mechanical ventilation. So, you know, we were able to do a lot of work in Colorado because builders are generally using the same type of exhaust strategy. So that's something that wasn't really changing or on the radar as something that really needed to be changed in the current practice. But looking at a lot of the models we have in Texas, and builders who are still maybe using air cycler, or CFIS type ventilation strategies, being able to show the impacts with just making that change. There's a lot of situations for builders who are still using that, and depending upon how they're installing it, where it's 15 plus point reduction on their HERS index. And so I know that anecdotally, but being able to run that scenario quickly and just show, here's the one thing, if you just do this one thing, this is how much of an impact it'll have overall. So that's a big one. That's the number one. And then the second one you mentioned was the above grade walls, being able to change those based on their location and not just globally change all the walls, because you don't want to then overestimate attic walls with R5 sheathing or garage walls and things like that. So those are the two big ones. So the way we were able to work around some of those kind of goes back to working through models and building things that we know that would work. So we would end up trying to find other ways, building that model out. So if this wall is what we need to make it work, then we would maybe just do some of those manually and work through that, and then use the SM tool for the things that we know that we could change more easily. So it was just kind of a hybrid approach to doing some of that confirmation. So and then it would also kind of depend on the builder. If I knew the models didn't have, a garage wall, for example, then I'm more comfortable with running that with a different wall assembly that would end up on all the different orientations of the wall. So that's just we just had to work around that manually. We would have to just spend a little more time on running scenario modeling with the things that we knew we could adjust easily, and then kind of tracking those results. And so then we could say, all right, we know that we ran 50 of these and the result when we did that was this. So we know that if we can be pretty sure that when we add this in, it's going to have this impact. And so then we would go and start adding that in and sort of sampling how that would work until we felt like, okay, that is going to have this impact on the entire portfolio. And then we can then have the conversation with the builder about, here's the scenarios that we looked at, here's where you should go. And then we can start working on plugging all that in on the back end. So like I said, just kind of a hybrid approach to the tool itself.
Gotcha. Yeah. But it still sounds like it's net positive to your
Sure.
to your workflow, even
Sure.
if you have to kind of work around those edge cases. And I guess the good news is mechanical ventilation's there now. And that's what we do. Like, as soon as we have a product out there, as we start to get requests from our users, we respond, and we'll have those changing above grade walls based on their location here soon. And I'm kind of looking here at the question answer that there's a question here about how long it takes to get the results in an email, and kind of what the results look like. Chris, could you kind of answer that for me? It's kind of, how long does it normally take you to get results?
Yeah. So I've used this for all sorts of different sizes of projects, everything from 3 or 4 models going in, running a couple of scenarios. You get the results in 20 seconds, all the way up to the largest projects, where you're maxing everything out. You still get the results in less time than you would on getting your batch export CSV. So it's maybe 15 minutes on the largest scenario project you're doing. So it's not long at all. And then the results, you're getting an Excel formatted sheet with all the naming conventions because you have the ability to name the scenario, so you can track that more easily in your sheet. So it's spitting that out to you with all of your different scenarios that you selected, and then in your columns that are going across the right hand side, all of the metric results. So if you're used to looking at spreadsheets and you're used to plugging that kind of information in manually to track it, it's spitting it out in a way that you're really used to seeing and comfortable seeing. And then you can kind of play with that and format it in different ways. If you want to have it be usable to the client, or you just kind of use it for your own internal. But it's been really easy. You open it up and you make a few little adjustments to the column sizes, and you're able to look pretty easily at the results, and the way it lays out. You can see things moving in a trend line pretty easily within the rows of data. So, for us, we have no qualms about how that spits out. And then that helps us kind of look at any outliers within the work that we've done and go mess with those. But yeah, it's been, I can't, the results are quicker than you would expect from something doing something so robust within the tool. So it's for most of our projects, it's like a 2-minute, deliverable.
That's great to hear. It's always good to see kind of what you experienced on the other side. Like, I mess around playing with scenario modeling because I'm a nerd and like to see how things work. But it's good to see how it's done in the real world as well. So kind of in summary, what we've seen, kind of the 3 kind of use cases for scenario modeling we've seen is One, to evaluate how a specific like product or design change impacts the performance of a builder's plan. And that could be because a builder just calls you up and says, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Am I okay for Energy Star or Energy Code or what have you? And then the other one would be to say, the builder comes to you and say, hey, how do I meet this new 45L? And we kind of talked through that workflow of how you do that. And then the third one would be this kind of idea of providing feedback in a value engineering exercise in real time. That way, you could sit with the designers and they can throw ideas at you and you can evaluate them and tell them in really quickly. Are there other kind of use cases that you're starting to see that you didn't expect, that you're like, oh, I could actually go use this new tool for, where before you may not have thought about that?
Well, the one that you bring up is the ability. I was able to do this yesterday actually in a meeting, and so it was a lot of folks talking sort of at a high level about planning for future energy efficiency improvements, surrounding the 45L. So I was able to sit with sort of that group of stakeholders within the process, and I just started doing it as they were talking. Like, they didn't ask me to do it. They were just talking about it as a group. Well, what if we did this thing? What if we did this? What if we did this? And so I was actually using it in that situation, pulling up different models and kind of running those things as we were talking, and was able to basically build out a scenario modeling project while we were having that conversation. So that to me was something, I never really expected to use it for, but the agility that you have from having it in app, it's it's a tool that I use almost, I use it at least once a week, and so I think you're almost unlimited in the things you can do with it when you have it in the app. You can just plug a couple of things in and use it to see if it changes. It just, you feel a little more sense of freedom of, I can almost do anything I want to. So, it had a lot of value in that meeting yesterday, being able to go through and do all of that kind of as the conversation was happening. And, within a couple of minutes, there's some answers to the questions. So that it was able to move the meeting forward a little bit differently than you would be able to a year ago. You wouldn't necessarily be able to do all of that and have real answers to those questions. You would normally leave and go back to your office and spend a few days or weeks or however long to do that. You're able to do it right then. So it all goes back to, you're helping that builder make decisions faster than they would normally be able to previously.
Great. Yeah, thanks for that, Chris. I think we have like 5 or 6 minutes left here. And I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your day to share your experience with other raters in the industry. I got to kind of see what it was like for you guys working in Texas and the relationships and knowledge sharing you guys have amongst business competitors in the same markets down in Texas. And it was really cool to see. And that's something that I think I know I can learn from to see how sharing knowledge helps everybody and helps the entire industry grow. So thanks for your time here. I'm going to transition to answer a few more questions here. And again, thanks, Chris.
Of course, thank you.
So I have a couple questions here. One is, when you do scenario modeling, does it save the Ecotrope files with those changes? The answer is no. All the scenario modeling changes are temporary, so they don't make any actual edits to the energy model. It just takes that energy model, makes a temporary change, evaluates it, saves it to the spreadsheet, and shares it with you. There's a follow-up question here that says, does this mean that the HVAC and mechanical systems will be batch modified? And these questions are related because we intend to keep the scenario modeling functionality roughly in line with the batch modification functionality. And right now we're focusing on adding more design changes to scenario modeling. And once we're done with that, we're going to transition to making sure that anything you can change in scenario modeling, you can also change in batch modifications. So HVAC and mechanical ventilation will be batch modified. It's not right now, but it will be. Also a question about a sample of what the results spreadsheet looks like. I can definitely share that with you, an example of what this looks like. And maybe we can send it out with the recording here at the end. And then final two questions about how do you get the app? How do you get this tool? Reach out to me. My email is david@ecotrope.com or email info@ecotrope.com and we can get you set up. It does come with an additional fee for access to scenario modeling, but that fee is kind of scaled on how much or how big of an organization you are. So we think it's at a pretty reasonable price point. And once you have it, it's unlimited usage. So you can use it as much as you want. And that means each time you use it, it becomes a little bit cheaper per use after that. And I think that's all of the questions here. We're at 2:42 East Coast time. And again, thanks for everybody for showing up and listening here. We'll send out a recording and the question and answer and example results. And that'll wrap it up. Thanks everybody for attending.